Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who allows AI to write these intros. I'm still thankful he lets me record these voiceovers, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. My name is Sean Callanan, and welcome to episode 335. Today's guest is Jentry Mullins. He's VP Ticket Sales and Service at BSE Global. You might know them as the Brooklyn Nets. Really looking forward to chatting with Jentry about tickets and sales and his career. You might be listening to this episode at sportsgeekhq.com. All episodes are available at the Sports Geek website, but you also might find, and you hope that we'll find it, all good podcast platforms, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, the like. If you could leave a review, I really would appreciate it. As always, you can contact me at Sean Callanan or Sean at sportsgeekhq.com if you want to try it via email, but Sean Callanan and Sports Geek on most platforms. For those of you who are looking to get into sports and understand the opportunities that are in sports, you really should give this episode a listen. I chatted with Jentry Mullins, based out of New York. He talks about his sports business career in multiple roles, in multiple teams, and now finding himself in Brooklyn, working with the Brooklyn Nets in ticket sales and service, and some of the things that powers the world of sports. If you can sell, you'll always have a job in sports. Here is my chat with Jentry Mullins. Very happy to welcome to the podcast today Jentry Mullins. He is the Vice President of Ticket Sales and Service at BSE Global. You might know them for the Brooklyn Nets and Barclays Center. Gentry, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sean. Like I said, really grateful and thankful to be here talking shop with you.
No problems. As I always do, I always want to find out how people got their start into the sports business. What was your first gig and your first foray into sports?
Yeah, it was a group sales internship with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, an NFL team over here in the States. So honestly knew nothing about sales, but it was one of those experiences that, just found myself around the, like-minded individuals and, just wanted to work in sports, and honestly had no clue why an NFL team would need somebody to help them with sales. But it's been kind of funny because for the last decade, all I've done is really focus on how to drive ticket sales for teams. So
a lot of people come in via that intern route, and again, a lot of people come in via that sales route. First of all, like, were you? What was the reasoning for getting into sports? Were you like a lot of people, big sports fan? Hey, I want to work in sports, but not knowing what it was, and that was the initial attractant.
Yeah, it's a great question. I come from a really small town where very rural Virginia, where I played baseball my entire life, and really that's how me and my dad and really bonded, was going to sporting events together. My dad being my little league coach and helping me throughout all the years. And it was one of those things when I was in college, having a sports management degree, I just wanted to work in sports. I didn't know what vehicles there were to do that through, but it was just one of those things where, like, I just want to work in sports no matter what, and came across, Teamwork Online one day and, really applied to everything, whether it be community relations or, partnerships or, again, sales. I mean, I think I've, applied to 163 jobs and I got one response back. Wow. Like I said, really thankful for that opportunity. And, that's kind of the reason I wanted to work in sports.
And so you, like, first of all, amazing resilience, persistence, and grit, which is one of my qualities I look for in people. So then you got in that role, like you do a lot of work at university, sports management, but then you actually get in the role at the Buccaneers in that sales piece. Was it a case of getting in and I have to learn everything new again because it was a completely new skill? At sales, it's not something that they teach in university. They teach a lot of the structure of things, but sales is such a key part of sports. Was it something you had to learn everything from the beginning?
Yeah, I tell our entry level team this all the time, but like, I don't think that you could come into a sports sales role as more raw than I was. I mean, literally had no idea about anything in regards to sales. It wasn't a part of my college curriculum. I mean, my college curriculum was more about like learning how to become a PE teacher than it was about actual like sports, management itself. I just always gravitated to the few classes that were around business and sports, right? But yeah, once I got there, what I've always loved about sales, and I preach this all the time, is it's almost disguised as a blue collar job, and the fact of like the amount of work that you're going to put into this is the exact results that you're going to get out of it. And for somebody that was as simple minded as me, it was one of those things where like, hey, if I just make more calls than other people, if I just go on more meetings than other people, then I'm probably going to find myself towards the top of the board. And then, I was smart enough to know that I wasn't the smartest person in the room. And so just surrounded myself with a lot of really talented sellers in the organization and really took the training and development that they gave me. And, from there, it's just kind of on me to execute.
So you talk a bit about, I guess, the always be closing, mentality of sales, and it's, the next no help me prepare you to the next yes, which is, common sales talk. You've had some time at multiple teams prior to being at now the Brooklyn Nets, at the Buccaneers, at the Cavs, in the NBA, and the Suns in the NBA. Were there particular learnings that you learned at those different teams to further refine those tactics, both from a sales point of view, but then also managing a sales team? Yeah,
they were all really similar. When I was at the Buccaneers, where I spent the majority of my selling career, I mean, we were the worst team in football. I was there from 2014 to 2017, so this was long before the Tom Brady era. But we got the number one pick when I was in Tampa, which obviously means that we were the worst team in the league. And then I transitioned out to Phoenix to run an entry-level sales team, my first job in leadership. We were I think second worst team in the league my first year there. We were the worst team in the league the second year. Got the number one pick there with DeAndre Ayton. And then, then I transitioned out to Cleveland after that, which was, we were the second worst team in the league all 3 years I was in Cleveland. And so what that taught me, and what, again, this is my selling experience and philosophy at this point, is like, we can't really focus on the product on the court. Like, I can't control that. Our team members can't control that. So how do we sell an experience that no matter if we win 82 games or we lose 82 games, that our sales process is going to stay the same, right? And that we focus on the client and how do we become solutions-based, whether that be a family, whether that be a super fan, whether that be a business, that, regardless, like we control what we can control. And then everything else on top of that is just, better for us.
And so it's a little bit of like, a lot of times we're talking to digital teams that are going through, supporting those teams when you're not having that winning time on the court or on the field, but you've got to consistently produce the same output. But then you have the advantage of, hey, when the team does start winning, those processes, it's like putting kerosene on that fire, and that process really works. So is it really important to, help your team work through those doldrums and understand, if I was to take a phrase from the 76ers, to trust the process a little bit?
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, the words I always say is like, it needs to be a predictable process for us, right? Like that regardless of what happens, like our process is always going to produce results. And so, as we talked about it with all of those teams, was like, how do you just be big wave ready? Because that moment's going to come, right? Like, everything is cyclical in sports that, at some point you're going to be on the mountaintop and at some point you're going to be in the valley. And so how do we just set ourselves up to that? And I think as you look at all three of those former teams that I was at, they were big wave ready, right? The Bucks were sold out of season tickets. The Suns went on their final run. They're sold out of season tickets. Same thing with the Cavs now. And so I think that just goes to, credit to all of those organizations that, even in the doldrums, those seasons of waiting, like they were preparing, they were getting ready, and really building a predictable sales process to put them at the position to really capitalize when it happened.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, a lot of people use sales, like I said, as an entry point into sports and look to move into other departments. But yourself staying in that sales role, like talk about that as sales as a career path and the opportunities that it provides. And I guess, what are the options for someone, staying in sales, and what does it potentially look like as a career path?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one I'm really passionate about because it's given me a life that like I didn't really expect that was possible, Sean. Like I mentioned, I'm from rural Virginia. Like I'm from one of those counties where like no one leaves, right? Like, I think my county has 3 stoplights, and now I live in New York, which obviously like, I can look outside and see 3, right? But, when you talk about giving them the opportunity, sales to me has always been a simple but not easy type profession. In the fact of I know what it takes, if I do XYZ, I'm going to get promoted to XYZ position. Right. And so, it can almost be like a very clear, vertical ladder in the fact of where you want to go to it. And so as you think about being in a career path, you could stay in a sales role and make really good money selling for 20, 25 years and becoming that person in that marketplace. Or, like myself, you can go in that leadership route. And that's one where, for me, I found a lot of fulfillment out of the fact that someone took a chance on me and invested in me and cared about me. How do I get to do that for others? And that's really been kind of my, calling card, since I got into this business is how do I change other people's lives? The Buccaneers did for me. And so, those are two. I mean, you could obviously go through the sponsorship sales route as well. There's a lot of, transferable skills as well. But I think what I would encourage people to think about too is don't think of it just as a vertical ladder, but what are also those other things, on a horizontal way. You don't always have to go up and down from a career standpoint. You can learn other things, those transferable skills as well.
I think, one of the key transferable skills is just the ability to sell. Like you said, it is a process. It is a repeatable process. And whether you're selling, entry-level tickets and people coming to their games for the very first time, it's a very different prospect to, what season ticket renewal looks like to, especially now in sports and especially for stadiums like Barclays, you've got all these different properties and assets that are being sold, different experiences. So, to just say someone is in sales is a very broad term because there's so many different types of sales, someone that's selling high-end hospitality or, like you said, assisting your corporate partners in closing that sale. It gives a lot of variety in your work and a lot of variety in potentially what your role could be.
Yeah, and that's what we tell our team members, this job will be as monotonous as you want it to be almost in a sense, right? As you mentioned, there's so many different things that you can sell. There's so many different clients that you can really get involved with. There's so many different businesses that you can just learn about that, if you really just shortchange yourself, it could be a job where you're just making, 60, 70 calls a day. Or it could be one where, you're going outside and meeting with different businesses all day long, right? And I think that's where, you can really change up your job in sales as much as you really want to.
And how has the sales role changed? And, a lot of the stuff that we do is working on the digital side, but also the data side to attract that data that potentially becomes sales leads. How has technology changed the sales role from your early days to now in sophistication in knowing that customer, whether you've called them before or whether they're a long-time customer? How has that changed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, so much. I mean, I remember when I was, really started making cold calls and was in a selling role completely in 2014. It was really just phone calls and emails was kind of the only thing we did. Now I think we're getting to a place, obviously, where, text has become a huge part of just a normal cadence from a sales perspective. We've got more information than we've ever had about, clients, coming into, to our ecosystem and how we're attracting the right type of people and scoring the right type of people that, at this point, there shouldn't really ever be a situation when we're talking about leads and, having team members say, hey, the leads aren't good, right? There's so many different opportunities to get really qualified people into the funnel. I think, other things I think we're going to start to see a lot more of is, and obviously you've seen it from the LinkedIn stuff I do, but, I think you're going to start to see a lot more team members and a lot more individuals become almost marketers in themselves from a sales perspective and attracting leads that way. And, I think you just see that in everything that we do. Everything is just so much more really quick hitters from a content standpoint. How is that going to start to turn into, lead magnets personally, not just from the company standpoint? Yeah,
definitely. I wanted to open up about that. Previously, 20 years ago, someone who was in sales had a black book and it had their contacts and their people. And when the internet has opened that up and, the data and the back end piece that, that you'd work with, but you're consistent on LinkedIn. What is it about LinkedIn that makes it a platform that you want to keep posting on?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, it's just right off the bat, keep the main thing, right? It's where my network is. I don't, I want to make sure that it is a very, professional type, profile and message that comes from me. I don't necessarily, I love my dog and I post my dog all the time on Instagram. I just don't know that my community wants to see how cute my dog is. Right. And so I think also when you do that type of stuff, like you really start to open yourself up personally to all those people and like what they have to, comment and, talk about, in your life, from an influencer standpoint. And, what I have to talk about is sports sales, sports leadership, sports cultures. And that's what I feel comfortable in. That's what I'm known for, at least on LinkedIn. And so I think, my audience, shows up hopefully at 8 to 5 every day and 1 o'clock every day, and they know exactly what they're going to get. They're not going to get something random out of left field from me. Like, they come to me for specific knowledge and I go to specific people for specific knowledge as well. Right. And so I think that would be, kind of almost like really betraying the trust of my audience if I just randomly started talking about, my favorite pizza places in New York instead of sports sales.
Yeah, I think consistency is important, and also sort of knowing why and what you're talking to about your audience. But what I was attracted, why I got my podcast producer to reach out to you was a lot of people are lurkers or consumers. As LinkedIn's algorithm has changed, there's a lot of content being out there, and it's become a bit more of a trusted source. And like you said, it's more business related. It's where you can get your some information. I think the algorithm's changed since Microsoft took it over to being a bit more better feed, a bit better curated in what's being delivered. But a lot of people don't post on LinkedIn while they're in a role and while they're in a job. And sometimes there's even reticence. It's like, oh, why is Jentry posting on LinkedIn? Is he looking for a new job? It's like, and it's moving away. It doesn't mean that. And having that consistent approach of figuring out who your network is, keeping in touch with people. Yes, it may pay off down in the future, but it's just because someone's on LinkedIn, it doesn't mean they're in that hunt for a job. And there's nothing worse than, seeing recent layoffs with, people putting the post up, I've been laid off and now looking. It's really a platform that, I've believed in for a long time that, if you reap what you sow and if you keep it active, you never actually know what it might get. Is that sort of a little bit of how you go about LinkedIn? And have you been pleasantly surprised in some of the random connections and feedback that you're getting from some of your posting on LinkedIn?
Yeah, a lot. I think that's kind of what surprised me the most out of it is, the people that I see that are maybe, viewing my profile or getting random notes. I think the thing that I didn't expect as much from it was kind of the fulfillment that I've started to get from LinkedIn in itself, where, I get probably, 3-4 messages a week of just like, hey, like, I really appreciate, your post. Like, it inspires me, or, hey, it helped me, have that tough conversation with my boss, or it helped me hire somebody or make that tough change to a different career path. And, again, that's why at this point, that's why I do it. The fulfillment out of it, like, it's a lot of work, which I know, as a content creator, like, content creation is one of those jobs that seems easy until you start to do it. But, that was kind of the thing, was like, I knew at the end of the day, as you mentioned, like, most people are just lurkers on LinkedIn, and the fact of like, they love to consume content. I think the stat is that 1% of people on LinkedIn actually post weekly. And, when I started posting, I didn't know if I'd be good at it, but I did know one thing, that I would at least be consistent with it. And I made a promise to myself that, like, hey, regardless if I like doing this or I don't like doing it, if I'm going to commit to it, I'm going to give myself a year. And at the end of that year, then I'll decide if I want to keep doing it or not. And then, as if you do something for a year that consistently, like, you start to see some results of it, and it starts to become, as a sales guy, it's just cool to see the numbers grow. And then, like you mentioned, like, I've just got a lot of fulfillment out of the messages that I get out of it. And obviously now I get a ton of people reaching out, as far as like, wanting to come work for BSE Global, or, having questions about, our organization. So it's become a huge recruiting tool for me now too, which is obviously a huge plus.
And the other thing, sometimes I work with teams on their ticketing strategy and talking about, hey, we've got all this hospitality to sell. What do you think? And a lot of the times we find, the sales team is in their mode of work over here, but they don't actually share some of the great opportunities and what they're doing on LinkedIn without being in that real sales message. Not, hey, these tickets are available this Friday night and being salesy, but like a lot of your staff will be around on a game night, see the experience, and sometimes those snippets of, hey, this is my job. Oh, by the way, I also sell tickets, or I also sell hospitality. Like it does over-index if that kind of content gets shared on LinkedIn. Is that something you encourage your team to sort of share a little bit of their process, but also, hey guys, this is what I do for my role, if you're ever looking for tickets, because that's a really trusted network for them?
Yeah, and I definitely want to do more of this. I think a lot now, obviously, I've done it in my current capacity. Like, how would I do this as, the premium sales rep, from,
Yep.
6-7 years ago? And I think about like you mentioned, there's just so much crossover. Like, I think a lot of times when people think about selling on LinkedIn, like you mentioned, they post a picture of the hospitality, picture, and then they throw a seating chart on there and they say, hey, call me. But the problem is like the only people that are seeing that post are their actual colleagues, right? Like,
Yep.
as you think about prospecting and actually building an audience, that's the big part of it. First off, right? Like, you got to actually have the fish in the pond for you to actually see the message that you're wanting to be, fishing in. And,
Yep.
and so like, I think, especially as we think about like what, LinkedIn content looks like for a sports sales rep in the next 3 to 4 years, it's, hey, here's the 4 ways that you should be using, Nets tickets to help drive your business forward.
Yep.
Here's how, like, listen to this cool testimonial from one of my best clients talking about how they closed a deal in our most premium club. I think that's the stuff that we're going to start to see. And it doesn't have to be daily, but can you do something once a week that, like, especially in a market as big as New York, if somebody's going to find you, like, you make it as easy as they can to find you, right?
Yep. And there is that voyeurism and that unknowingness of the sports business. Like, we work in the sports business. We understand that the glamour, glitz, and the exciting parts of sports is what attract people. That's what they see from the outside. But like that pulling back the curtain a little bit and understanding what sports business is, you end up, on LinkedIn, people like leaning in and going, oh, that's what sports like. Oh, that's what it's like working for a team, or that's what it's like working, at a stadium when a big concert rolls into town. Like there's all these little extra stories that like the organization and the staff of the organization, can share that sort of, can permeate. Again, you don't know where that next lead might come from. So it's always, when people say, oh, I haven't got a story to tell, it's like, well, you're in a really interesting role that a lot of people don't know about, that they're interested in because they follow the product on court. You do have an interesting piece to sell, and it's just a matter of like learning how to use the tool to do that, whether it be LinkedIn or Instagram, because it's a really great visual platform. Like how you can sort of bring your network in, whether they be personal or professional.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's got something to say. Right. And I think, anytime I get lost about like, hey, what should I be posting about or what should I be talking about? I just really take back to myself like 2 to 3 years ago, or the student coming out of college, what would that person want to know? Right. Like, what would that premium seller in Tampa do now? And I think that makes it a lot easier because, when you just sit down and say, oh, like, what should I talk about? Yeah, it's really hard to just start, on the content creation side. But like once you start to put yourself in the shoes, like someone would kill to know the information that you have in your brain, right? So like, how can you just deliver that to others? And then that's how that value is going to just start to reciprocate, moving forward.
Back to the sales process. How have you seen the changing behaviors of fans and how that's affected the sales process? From a stronger season ticket, we want to sell as many of those as possible to, the Uberification effectively of sports, where people just go, I want to go, and they want to click a button, they want to go on occasion, to also the shift in more entertainment. I'm going to sport for entertainment. I'm not I'm not painting my face and going there as a rabid sports fan, but I'm looking at it as an entertainment option. How have you had to change? How has that changed behaviour of how fans are consuming sports change your sales process over the years?
Yeah, I think it really just goes back to, kind of the thing we were talking about earlier is like, how do we just get to know the client, at a deep level and understand what's the best fit for them? If the CEO wants to come here to help drive its business forward, like they're more than welcome. If we have that super fan that wants to paint their face, like they're more than welcome, right? I'm sorry. And then, and what we've done is, to answer your question, how has this evolved our sales process is, from a membership level, we now have 4 different, basically cohorts that, we have our fans in, instead of, like our businesses probably don't want the same type of events and perks and benefits as our super fans do. Right. And so how do we make sure that we cater both of those experiences to those fans to make sure that it's exactly what they want? And so that's why we have now a social fan, basically, cohort. We've got a super fan, a social, a business, and then a family, just to make sure that when you come here, like you're getting the most out of the value that, you're expecting, with our franchise.
And has that really been getting a better understanding of those different cohorts? Has that changed and widened the product mix that you have at your arsenal as a salesperson, whereas you're not selling, a limited number of different products, whereas now you've got that flexibility with different types of plans, different types of ticket packages, and different for those different cohorts. So you've got a few more offers that you can put forward to those different cohorts.
Yeah, I think it's more of just helping our fans make sure that they're maximizing those membership experiences, right? Like, we've got a multitude of different product mix because we understand that not everyone fits in a certain size and shape in regards to what they expect from how many games they want to come out to the seat, to the price, all of those things. But when you're committing to 21 to 40 2 games a year, which is a huge level of commitment to a team. Like, how do we just make sure that, you're getting, the most out of that? And that, allows us to really make sure that, you're getting to meet like-minded fans, that you're getting to meet like-minded representatives of the organization to make sure that, you feel valued, that, making sure that you come back year over year is almost like a tradition for you, your family, your business, whichever the case.
You mentioned it a few times, the word membership. It's one that's really common over here. If you become a member of the club, you're a part of the membership, but it's something that's sort of been developing, I think, in the US, sort of moving away from more transactional season ticket holders to membership. Has that been a conscious decision to sort of try to bring the fans in and make them feel more part of the club as a member, as opposed to like a season ticket holder, like holding a ticket?
Yeah, it's very conscious. It just didn't feel right, for us, and in my opinion, for you to have this great relationship with a team, or especially with one of our membership development representatives, and then all of a sudden the season end, hopefully in June, and then you don't hear from us again till October. Like, I just don't know that feels like a very, as close relationship as we're hoping to have with our fans. And so, this just allows us to make sure that we're, staying in touch with everyone throughout the year, that, they're getting, again, more value, more experiences that are outside just, coming to Barclays Center, and that's one of the ways that, we've made a really conscious decision in the fact of, like, I don't think, if we said season tickets, like that's a one size fits all type model. Like, we want to make sure that this is a tailored, customized approach to making sure our fans feel like they get the most out of their experience here with us. Terrific.
Just lastly, is there any particular trends in sport or in the sports sales space that are exciting you for the future ahead?
Definitely the content one. Obviously, I know we touched on that one a lot. Like, I'm keeping my eye on that one really closely, just because I've got to see the results. It's kind of one of those things where you kind of get to see around the corner just because of what we do from a content creation standpoint. So I'm really excited to see it. I mean, the amount of technology, the amount of different resources that, especially sports sales folks are starting to get is just so cool. And I'm just so jealous that, some of these things I didn't get when I was in the selling seat. But I think it's gonna be really, really exciting to see like how we continually find ways to creatively engage in a marketplace, in a society where everything is so noisy and so crowded. Like, how are people continue to fight through the clutter of that? And I think I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about just how the sports industry as a whole has really bounced back from the pandemic. So those are things I continue to keep my eyes on. I mean, it's a really fun time to be a part of sports business, in my opinion.
Definitely. And I think, I think the advent of AI, like how that can be interrogating some of the data that we do have, that potentially, you're getting on a call, you're about to call someone and it's say, oh, you're about to call Jentry, here's 5 questions you should be asking. Like, it doesn't have to be having ChatGPT writing scripts, but prompting different points, from previous notes or from the archive or from the data. If it helps that little, one of those touch points move the sale forward, it's going to be really advantageous.
No, and that's such a fun tool. I mean, I've got minimal, exposure and experience with it, but every time I do, like, I just come away just in awe every time I do mess around with, Chat GPT.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a bit, I think it's interesting in how, it's all going to be, you're still driving the tool. So it's what you put into the tool to say, what do you want? And so, for instance, a lot of the times we'll be doing our research for an episode and then we'll say, what are from all these articles from Jentry, what are the questions I should be asking? And that forms some of the questions I gave you today. So it's sort of that piece of accelerating what you're doing, as part of a process. Yeah. If you're more efficient as a salesperson, you can get to the next call, you can do those kind of things. So I think those kind of things, as that tech starts integrating with your CRM and your sales process, I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and I think, like, to your point, like, you're still the person driving it, right? So the experiences, the opportunities that you take and really, consume are really going to just, continue to help separate those folks that, are going to start to use that and use it as another tool in the tool belt rather than looking at it as really an enemy,
Yeah, definitely. Jentry, I want to finish up with the Sports Geek closing 5. Thank you very much for taking the time today. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
The first one I can ever remember was going to a Carolina Panthers game against the Atlanta Falcons. This was back in the Mike Vick days, and then my favorite player, which was Steve Smith Sr. And, me and my dad that's where we really got close, was taking those 5-hour drives from Virginia down to Charlotte to watch Panthers games maybe once, twice a year. And so, I think that's really, a huge part of my fanhood today.
True. You would have been to a lot of sports events, working in sports, and sometimes when you're working in sports, you don't get to sample all the best offers from a food point of view. But when you do go to a sports event, do you have a favorite food or a go-to food?
I think I just try to stay pretty traditional. I try to stay pretty safe. Like, I think I go probably like a chicken tenders type of option. Just I want to stay really safe there, and obviously it's kind of hard to mess those up in my opinion.
True. What's the first app you open in the morning?
I think just because I'm so active on it, LinkedIn is typically the first one, just because I want to kind of see what's happened overnight, if there's anything I've missed. But I usually start with LinkedIn.
Terrific. And is there someone that you follow? It might be someone on LinkedIn or on social or an author that you follow that the listeners should give a follow to?
Especially in the sports sales world, like, Travis Apple's a big mentor of mine, and he's really big into the content creation game as well. He's wrote a book about, how to become elite in sports sales, which I think is great. He runs a really good, great podcast around sports sales leaders on 52 Weeks of Hustle. So, he's really consistent. So I'd recommend Travis.
Terrific. We've probably spoiled it all the way through this, but I always ask, what social media platform is your MVP?
Yeah. It would be hard not to be going with LinkedIn on that one. So that's definitely the one.
Terrific. And I think it's probably obvious, but what is the best way for people to reach out, say that they've listened to the podcast and thank you for it, maybe ask you for some insights?
Yeah, LinkedIn's definitely the place to find me. As I mentioned earlier, I post every single day at 8:05 a.m. and then around 1 o'clock p.m. That's the easiest way to find me. I try to respond to every person that messages me or comments on my stuff. You can also email me here at my work email too. That's at jmullins@bscglobal.net. Happy to help however I can, to be a resource for all of your listeners, Sean. And, like I mentioned, just really appreciate you having me on the pod today. Obviously, like, your consistency has been crazy in this game too. So, kudos to you for all the work that you put into it. As I mentioned, the content creation game is not an easy one, but it's a lot of work. So, kudos to you for just the consistency, and I'm sure your audience definitely appreciates it.
Thank you very much, Jentry. And like I said, keep up the good work on LinkedIn. And my advice, be similar to yours. Sports always needs people in sales. If you can sell, you will find a home in sports. And so that's why I wanted to reach out for you. I really do admire the grind that everyone in sales does, because it is if if you're looking at the pie chart of where the revenue for sports comes in, there's a big chunk of that from sales, which is across ticketing and commercials. So we need more people like yourself and more people being willing to get out there and sell. So thank you very much for your time. And like I said, please reach out to Jentry on LinkedIn. Let him know that you listen to the podcast and really do appreciate it. Thanks for your time, mate.
Thank you, Sean. Take care.
Learn from the Sports Geek Amplify Season 2 cohort. Trajectory, Xtonet, SeatGeek, Sponsor CX, and Stats Perform. For more, go to sportsgeekamplify.com.
Thanks again to Jentry Mullins. Please, as he said, reach out to him on LinkedIn. He's active on LinkedIn, sharing tips around sales and the general sports business. So check him out. Please reach out to him and then tell him that you listen to the podcast and ask him a question. I really do encourage all listeners to reach out and say thank you to guests like Jentry who give up their time to share their insights. But following up that, I'm actually looking forward to meeting some people in real life. If you're listening to this, I hope I will see you at some upcoming conferences. I'll be at the Festival of Sport in Adelaide on June 30. I'll be at the Money in Sport on the Gold Coast on July 6, and I'll be at the Seed Conference, obviously, in Salt Lake City, July 14, 15. I implore you people, why am I saying you people? I implore everybody to attend conferences. They're so important for the industry. There's a lot of generous sharing. One of the things I always look forward to is finding out how different people are solving the same problem and then how we can apply it in different markets or even different industries or different sports. There's a lot to learn from that. That's what I love about conferences. I love that networking aspect, but also getting a little bit deeper than a brief conversation. It's part of the reason why I love podcasts, where I can go a little bit deeper on the conversation and understand what understand what people are doing. So please, if you are going to be in any of those conferences, whether it be Adelaide, Gold Coast, or Seat, please hit me up. Tell me you listen to the podcast. I really do like catching up with podcast listeners, but also if you haven't registered, please do so because we need, the conferences need that support. Conferences are a balance of getting great content in, and it's something that I hope that I provide, whether I'm moderating a panel or doing a keynote, but also a lot of the value is in the conversations, in the hallways, in the bars, in the networking events. So for mine, you get as much out of a conference as you put in. And so, put in the work to meet people, push yourself out of the comfort zone, but also don't be afraid to tell people what you're up to and what you're doing and what's working for you. It's not being overly bragging. It's sharing your story and your success. Because you don't realise that your success may actually help someone else because we're all on a different path of the journey. So, hope to see people in Adelaide, Gold Coast and Salt Lake. And then post-Seat, I'll be in Washington, DC, take a little bit of time off. But looking forward to catching up with some people there. And then I'll actually be in New York City as well. So if you're in that part of the world and you want to meet up, please let me know. Until I do see you at a conference near you, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Do you get Sports Geek news? Sean Callanan analyzes the latest sports business articles for you weekly. Sign up at sportsgeekhq.com. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.